Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
With Venmo Stash, a toggle on one hand and ordering a ride in the other means you're stacking cash back. With Venmo Stash, get up to 5% cash back when you pick a bundle of your favorite brands. Earn more cash when you do more with Stash. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply. Max $100 cash back per month. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is a vice chair of the New York State Republican Party and a county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us, our co-host, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and I am Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, it's just amazing how you have to pay attention to the news every 10 or 15 minutes because everything changes all of the time. I want to focus our attention on what happened in Minneapolis. So let me set up the framework for our discussion. What you have is an insurrection or a quasi-insurrection going on in Minneapolis in the state of Minnesota. You have a mayor, Fry, a governor, Walz, an attorney general, Ellison, all of which have urged resistance, that's the operative word, resistance to legal, lawful, constitutional law enforcement by the federal government using ICE and the Border Patrol to rid the city of Minneapolis of illegal migrants who are dangerous, violent criminal actors who are a threat to the public safety and the quality of life in the city of Minneapolis, as opposed to other cities and states where you don't have democratic regimes controlled by the left-wing radicals. Those cities have cooperated with ICE and with law enforcement to rid those cities, those areas, of dangerous people who shouldn't have been in the country to begin with. Now they have a record from their home countries or in the United States of criminal and dangerous activity. This is not a grand sweep of everybody who came in here by jumping the border. This was a targeted attempt, notwithstanding the rhetoric involved. Now, you've had two unfortunate deaths because of the lack of cooperation by local government officials and by local law enforcement. And it became a political governmental crisis, and Trump, to his credit, took over the messaging on this as well as the conduct of this by sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis to meet with the government officials. How this is going to turn out, I don't know. I don't know that President Trump knows. I don't know if the border czar Homan knows. The problem is this has been totally politicized. So let's start with the basics. Number one, this was a lawful, legal, constitutional action to enforce the immigration laws. Number two, while there is no obligation under federal law for local authorities to help enforce federal immigration law, what they can't do is they cannot resist, they cannot obstruct, they cannot interfere. And what these characters in Minneapolis did is they did not support the federal authorities when they were making these arrests. So you had riots going on, you had physical obstruction, you had violent exchanges. They did not do their basic job of the police power, which is to protect the federal officials when doing their business and doing crowd control. That's the root of the problem. And if they had abided by the obligation just to keep the people in the jail so they could be picked up quietly and nicely by the federal authorities, you wouldn't have rioting in the streets. You just pick them up. And in those places where you don't have the radical blue extremists controlling the government, that's exactly what happens. And it's not any incidents. It's a simple process. So they created an environment of lawlessness, created a rhetoric of insurrection and resistance, and then they're surprised that some unhinged characters or some opportunists and sometimes paid professional agitators went in there and disrupted their city. So what's going to happen? I don't know. This is a country that's divided. I'm very concerned about this. We cannot allow these insurrections to go on. The states and the localities have no right to nullify federal law enforcement. The nullification doctrine has been addressed. It was addressed during terms of Andrew Jackson, during the terms of Abraham Lincoln. Supreme Court has recognized there is no power of the states or the counties or the cities to nullify federal law. That's been asked, answered, resolved, and why these people want to resurrect that nullification doctrine and encourage a resistance that puts everybody's lives at risk and civil order at risk. You got me. Eric.
Yeah, in fact, it wasn't just Abe Lincoln. The United States fought a 4-year civil war regarding
exactly right. Exactly right.
The South's effort to nullify anti-slavery laws. So a little more perspective and background. Let's remember that Governor Walz and Mayor Frye are the exact same two guys who were in government back in 2020 during the BLM riots following the George Floyd murder. And they just allowed the city to be destroyed. They allowed businesses to be trashed, stores to be looted, buildings burned, violence against law enforcement, all because Governor Walz thought it would be good for and Frye thought it would be good for their reelection. I mean, one of the police precincts, the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis, which was destroyed during the BLM riots, is still destroyed. They never rebuilt it. The police building was never rebuilt. So these are also, it's not a coincidence that these riots and these uprisings occur in sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. Because by being a sanctuary state and being a sanctuary city, you're a magnet for people who come here illegally. And it's also on top of that, you have a governor and a mayor who supported the Biden-Harris open border policy. They wanted people to come here illegally. So, and then they wonder why the federal government is focusing on Minneapolis when in fact they were inviting all these people here. And it should be remembered, which is getting lost, unfortunately, the fraud, the Somali fraud that's been going on with Medicaid, which apparently $1 billion is just the tip of the iceberg.
No, it's $9 billion and counting.
And counting.
Yeah.
So these are the same governors and mayors that have been overseeing this. And why are they overseeing this? And why are they allowing this to happen? Because these are their constituents. These are the people that they want to vote for them. Now, what is particularly obnoxious about the position they've taken, Richard, you're 100% right. They are not obligated to assist federal law enforcement, but they can't obstruct. But there is a simple solution. And Tom Holman, who I think could be a hero in this, but I think he's been terrific, one of the bright stars in the Trump administration, has said, look, what we would like to do is we want to obviously tamp down on the violence and the presence of the protesters. Why don't you give us the people sitting in your city prisons and your state prisons that you arrested, Governor Walz and Mayor Frye, that are sitting in your prisons, who came here illegally and then committed another crime, give them to us. Just hand them over. Then we don't have to worry about protesters and rioters. But even then, even these people, criminals in Walz's eyes and in Frye's eyes, they're refusing to hand over because they do not want to give Trump a win. They are it is more important to them to help illegal aliens, allow buildings and businesses to be burned and violent protests to go on the streets because it helps their reelection or it helps them politically, as long as it hurts Trump. That's really all they care about. So they're more interested in protecting these criminals than in protecting U.S. citizens. So just think of how far this has gone. You have a group of people that storm a church Sunday. People of faith who've gone to pray, and they take it upon themselves that they think that it's okay to interrupt the Mass because they claim that one of the ministers is an ICE agent. Who cares? How dare you interfere with these people's First Amendment right to freedom of religion, freedom of association, and freedom to congregate? Who are you that you can deprive other American citizens because you're pissed off about something, even though you're, particularly since you're the ones breaking the law? They go to I don't remember if it was a Hyatt or a Hilton, but a hotel owned by a private individual.
A Hilton.
And they break and they destroy it. They destroy the lobby. They break the glass in the front of the building. They trash the lobby, all because they claim they're ICE agents staying there. And whether they are or aren't, how dare they destroy this guy's livelihood, his business, the way he supports his family. These things are absolutely grotesque. But I think there's a bigger picture here than just the supposed anti-ICE agitation. I think the bigger picture is that you have anarchists, Marxists, Antifa, Kafia Nazis who are wedded to undermining American federal government sovereignty over our own country. They want to create no-go zones like they have in Europe, like you have in France and Belgium, where federal authorities will not go for fear that they'll be attacked, or it's not worth it, like just give it away. That's what I think is in large part going on here. ICE is just the most recent excuse to help try to create some of these no-go zones. Because if you go back to the BLM riots, whatever other cause celeb there is, these people, and if you look at who these people are, these are the same agitators that show up at Columbia, to protest Israel's existence and to kill the Jews. These are the same people that were rioting in 2020 after George Floyd was killed, destroying businesses and homes and cities. These are the exact same people. That's the same funders for these people. Now, you do have some different people coming out who genuinely believe that ICE is overstepping their bounds, and they may be, and you want to do it peacefully, that's your right. But you can't do it illegally, and you can't do it violently. You can't get in the way of federal authorities who are trying, to carry out their constitutional duties under the law. But this also puts a burden on the federal government, on President Trump and Homeland Security. It means you've got to do it right. It means you have to be using common sense, and you have to use the proper messaging. I'm afraid that Secretary Noem has really gotten in a little bit over her head on some of this. Some of her messaging has been terrible. We really have to be focused. She really has to be making the points better about why ICE is there and what they are attempting to achieve. And I think what the American people are concerned about, and it's a legitimate concern, Donald Trump was elected in large part because he ran on, I will secure the border. And he has done that. He gets an A+ for that. And the American people, I believe, are overwhelmingly supportive of arresting and deporting people who have not just come here illegally, but people who have come here illegally and committed crimes. Get them the hell out of here. And I think there's overwhelming support for that. But what is being lost, whether it's a narrative that's just off or whether it's factually correct, and I'm just not sure. If indeed ICE is there arresting people who have come here illegally but have done nothing else wrong, that is not something the American people are supporting. People that have come here and are, been working all their lives, been paying taxes, and have been good citizens. Those are not the people that the American people want to see deported. And I think the federal government needs to do a better job in saying, these are the people we're focusing on. That's why I think Tom Holman, when he first got there and said, give us the people in your prisons, I think that was a stroke of genius, because when Walsh and Fry say no, and I believe they have, maybe they've changed their position since they've come on the air, it just demonstrates how irrational, how crazy, how extreme their position is, that they will not hand over people who have committed crimes well beyond just coming here illegally. So I think DHS has to do a far better job of working on their messaging. And I think to the extent that there's being a premium placed on arresting people that haven't broken any law other than coming here illegally, I think that has to shift, because this is a narrative that Republicans and Trump should be winning overwhelmingly. And we're beginning to lose that battle. We're beginning to lose the narrative. So hopefully we can get this back on track, because I think the policy overarchingly is the right one. But I think we need to look beyond that. This is just about ICE. I think this is about individuals, as I say, anarchists, Marxists, Kafir Nazis, who are really interested in creating no-go zones and undermining American sovereignty on our own territory.
I agree with that. Jesse, we have a few minutes in this first segment. Your thoughts, and we can pick up again with you on this in the beginning of our second segment.
Sure, a lot of this was already said, and I just want to introduce a couple of different factors here. Number one, I believe that there are paid, and I believe that there are paid antagonists in these groups. It's no surprise that the same locations that have been the subject matter and the fire point of the riots of 2020 are now once again the same location in which we're having these riots and this issues here. This is a tragedy, but there's one thing here. Number one, we have to allow these individuals, and before we rush to judgment, and politicians on both sides love to rush to judgment. Since the tragic issue with Alex Curtis being killed, we have now learned a little bit more. The spitting on a federal officer, the fact that he got into a scuffle with federal officers. We got video of him kicking a federal vehicle. So this is not just some individual that was... He
wasn't a mere observer, as they try to posture.
He was not a mere observer and such. And listen, he has a right to bear arms. He had that permitted. He had a gun that was permitted and such, right? But that does not mean that you do not put the safety of a federal officer in jeopardy. And I believe that's what led to it. I'm sorry, let me just go back for a minute. What really led to this is what Tom Homan has said. Something that he, in a very solemn moment, as he came and took over the operation in Minneapolis, said this is what he feared. That's why he begged. And he used the word begged. For politicians and those opponents of the ICE efforts to rid our communities of criminals who are here illegally, that they had to tone down the rhetoric. There is no doubt that the rhetoric being used by the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialists, the anarchists, the Marxists, every opponent of the never-Trumpers is what led to this fire spot. And one more thing before we break that I want to add. I don't believe in coincidences. It's amazing that the narrative now about Minnesota and Minneapolis has changed. It is now the Trump administration killing innocent people, which now we're seeing it's not. The woman who drove her vehicle into a ICE agent who was shot, she used that 8-ton vehicle as a weapon. This situation with Curtis, now we see more of the information that's coming out about him being not just a mere observer or a pacifist, maybe a little bit more active that placed our law enforcement officers and their lives in jeopardy to some capacity. But it's interesting. There is a multi-billion-dollar scandal going on with COVID monies and the misappropriation of that money. And what's funny about that is that no one is speaking about that. Why? Because the Democrats have switched the narrative.
They've diverted everybody's attention from that, Jesse.
Absolutely. And I do agree, and I think we all agree. I believe the Secretary Noem has not just gone out beyond her skis, she has jeopardized the narrative and the messaging of the administration. And she had to be sidelined on this issue. The fact that they had to remove and demote Gregory Bombino because it seemed that they were carrying the administration's policies further than what Tom Homan was charged to do and what the president himself was charged them to do. And that's where there was a breakdown. I think that the fact that Tom Homan has brought a little bit of common sense, a little bit of sensibility, and what he has done is stopped fanning the flames and actually lowered the temperature there. But that temperature is going to rise up again. It's going to rise up again for two reasons. One, we've already asked, turn over your illegal aliens that you have in your own jails that have committed crimes. They have the Minneapolis and Minnesota has not done that. That's going to be a problem. Number two, the Democrats nationally and specifically in Minnesota do not want to focus the attention back on to the lost $1 billion in COVID monies that went to the Somalian communities and went to misappropriated the companies that don't even exist.
Very well said, gentlemen. Let's take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments with more interesting and important conversation on this week's Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Demo, not for broadcast. Property of WABC New York.
If you're thinking about changing schools, why wait? At Manhattan University, love those guys. You don't have to start over. With transfer-friendly pathways, your credits count, and you keep moving forward. From day one, you're part of Jasper Nation, preparing for the real world. And with New York City just a train away, opportunity is everywhere. Ready to move forward without missing a step? Visit manhattan.edu/transfer and enroll today. Manhattan University. Don't start over. Move forward.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Tax Act is here anytime you want to easily file your taxes. Tax Act is here for the early birds who like to knock them out as soon as the season opens. And for the procrastinators who like to wait until the very last minute. Tax Act is also here for the middlers who file right in the middle of tax season. No one ever talks about the middlers, but Tax Act sees you, and Tax Act respects you. Tax Act. Let's get them over with.
ABC's David Muir, the most trusted anchor in America, the most watched anchor in America. Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir the #1 newscast in America. Most trusted, most watched. David Muir on ABC.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is our co-host, noted attorney, commentator, attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Switching gears, gentlemen, let's go to Iran. So this is what's happened in Iran. A number of weeks ago, you've had spontaneous demonstrations all across the country in challenge to the regime, a theocratic regime, a despotism run by the mullahs, a dangerous place for any kind of political dissent. Economy is crashing. They don't have sufficient food or water. Their capacity to govern is greatly diminished. People are living hand to mouth there in what could have been one of the great countries in the world in terms of resources and economy, and once upon a time was a place aligned with the West. So you have this going on, and there's a history here. The Shah was removed because Jimmy Carter brought back the first Ayatollah. I never allowed him to leave Paris. They brought him back. They allowed him to come back. And then what happened? They created a regime that was anti-West, anti-American, anti-Israel, spread terror all around the world. Obama and Biden, obsessed with the nuclear deal, figuring they can cut a deal, that these people were transactional, not understanding their mindset. They're ideological supremacists. They're Islamists who believe in world domination. They thought they could cut a deal, gave them billions of dollars, and that money was spread all across the world, in the Middle East, but in Europe and the United States, all over, to try to undermine Western civilization and a system of Western values, which is tolerance for freedom of speech, opportunity, religion, assembly. All that is against this Islamist regime. They believe in their view of who God is, and everybody else has to be subjugated to that. It's a regime that executes political opponents, people who do not wear the traditional headdress. They killed women for doing that. They've thrown gays off of windows or summarily executed them. This is a dangerous regime. Israel did the world a favor by limiting their powers and taking off their network of terrorists to a good extent, but not totally. So you have these demonstrations going on in a couple of hundred different regions of Iran. And then what happens? Trump says, we have your back, help, it's on its way. Well, I don't know, we're 3 weeks in, gentlemen. I see that there's an armada coming close to Iran, or right there, but help on the way for whom? Tens of thousands of people have either been killed or disappeared into the torturous chambers, and they're still in power. The mullahs are still in power. I believe, respectfully, Jesse and Eric, that this is our last best hope of ridding the world of this dangerous cancer, and we better take advantage of it. And there is no deal to be made. You know, they keep talking about having a deal about nuclear weapons. I'm all for getting rid of nuclear weapons, but you can't trust them on a deal. And number two, let's not forget, you have a legitimate rebellion against an illegitimate regime going on. Do not forget about the Iranian people. Do not forget that they're losing their lives and their freedom, and we should be backing their play because it's in our interest and the world's interest to get that done. Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a regime that was born at war with the United States in 1979. I mean, aside from Khomeini being allowed out of Paris, which he never should have been allowed, there was a brief civil war that people forget that was going on in Iran in 1979. It was the Ayatollahs by Khomeini against some of the democratic forces, and Jimmy Carter took no position. And then, of course, when the Ayatollah ordered the students, quote-unquote students, to take over the American embassy and take American hostages for 444 days, that cemented his legitimacy amongst the Iranian people and became a leader, and the regime is off and running. And ever since that day, Iran is responsible for thousands of American deaths, you know, from the Khobar Towers to the Marine barracks in Beirut to 1/3 of the dead and wounded in Afghanistan and Iraq. There's a lot of American blood on these people's hands. And, of course, they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. They are the ones who funded, trained, and armed Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, terrorist groups in Iraq that have attacked, and Syria that have attacked American service members over 150 times. So this is a very bad regime. And it bases its legitimacy on fighting the United States. We're the big Satan, Israel's the little Satan, and they view a nuclear weapon as critical, essential, existential in the survival of their regime, and they will never give it up. It is all about the nuclear weapon and a ballistic missile system with which to deliver it. And, of course, Barack Obama in 2015 gave them all of that. He gave them a legal path to a nuclear weapon, a ballistic missile system with which to deliver it, and over $115 billion in sanctions relief so that they could build a military, build a nuclear weapon, build a ballistic missile, and fund the terrorist organizations around the world. So, because Obama was interested in changing American policy from an Israel-centric Middle East to an Iran-centric Middle East, or at least a bipolar Middle East. And so he didn't really care. And that's why he said nothing in 2009. That's why he allowed Assad to survive and enforced the red line in Syria, because Assad was the Ayatollahs, the Iranians' closest ally. But fast forward, that's all ancient history. Let's fast forward to today. This regime has to go. There's been, as you point out, Richard, a legitimate, organic uprising by the Iranian people against this regime. There are over 1 million protesters in the streets in every province, in every city across the country. This regime has gunned down, murdered in cold blood, probably over 20,000 civilians, and no one says anything. Silence. Israel is attacked on October 7th. 1,400 people are murdered in their beds. Families burned, babies have their heads crushed, babies cooked in ovens, ripped out of the womb of their mother, murdered in front of the screaming mother. That, every time Israel defends itself, the same Kafia Nazis, anarchists, and Marxists that are now in Minneapolis, they're out in the streets and on the campus, our college campuses, protesting Israel. But I don't see any protest, anywhere in the United States, standing up with the Iranian people. But As you point out, there is now the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike force is now in the region. It has more than sufficient capability to take out the regime. Regime change must now be American policy. Because keep this in mind, if we, quote unquote, reach a deal with the Ayatollahs, in their mind, they have a very different concept of time. So we'll wait a little bit longer to get our nuclear weapon and our ballistic missile system. But posit this, Trump is out, Trump's term expires, and a Democrat wins.
Yeah, we get another Biden, we get another Obama.
Another Obama, yeah. Then you're going to get the same, we can negotiate with these people, they can have some enrichment, they can have some ballistic missile power, the sanctions, maybe they're a little too harsh. They're biding their time, betting that there will be a Democratic administration after Trump. We've got to take these pieces off the board. There's got to be regime change now. But what's particularly interesting to me is we're now hearing from our supposed Arab allies, our moderate Arab allies, Saudi Arabia and the UAE in particular, that they will not allow us to use their airspace to attack. They're opposed to the United States attacking the Iranian regime. Now, there's a lot of history which demonstrates that what these regimes say publicly is very different what they say privately. But let's take them at their word that what they're saying, that they will not cooperate with us in an attack on Iran. Well then, fellas, then don't ask for security guarantees from the United States. We're in a position now to be able to take out this regime without putting any boots on the ground or putting any Americans in harm's way. But you want security guarantees. You want us to allow this regime to survive, but they attack you. You then want us to commit our troops to your defense. It doesn't work that way. You either view this regime as evil, fundamentally evil, and a threat to your national security, and you stand with us and cooperate with us as we engage in regime change, or don't come begging to us, asking us to put Americans in harm's way to defend you because you're too gutless to defend yourselves. And by the way, those F-35s you've been asking for, Saudi Arabia, no way. Forget it. You're too unreliable. So either stand with us, you're either our allies, or you're not. But that comes back to the fundamental point. Most importantly of all, there's only one democratic government, pro-Western, pro-American government country in that region, and that's Israel. That's the only country the United States can rely on in that region. And for that reason alone, the United States, without putting any boots on the ground, maybe in cooperation with the Israelis or maybe on our own, we've got to take out this regime. This regime is a threat to the United States. It's a threat to our national security, the Western civilization, and the American-led world order. We're there. Let's take care of business. Time for this regime to go.
Absolutely. Jesse, your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo it's time for this regime to go. But as we sit here and doing this interview, there's about 5,700 confirmed dead by the Human Rights Activist Network. Another 17,000 maybe related deaths to this. More than 30,000 arrests related to these protests of these individuals that are out there. And, since January 8th, there's been a crackdown on internet and communications out of Iran as the mullahs there and Khomeini's ruling regime has tried to isolate and black out Iran so that the rest of the world doesn't see what's going out there. But it's coming out now. Different news agencies have been viewed and have seen images and first-hand accounts of what's going on there, of government buildings being burned down. It's being described as a war situation, a bloodbath, an apocalypse. As we have said here, we have to also remember that it's almost been about 50 years that this problem has been here, 47 years specifically that the mullahs have taken over Iran, and that has been an ongoing Cold War or active war. Let's call it an active war because Iran, as you both have pointed out, have used proxies to kill U.S. servicemen and to kill and attack U.S. allies in that area and throughout this country. They are a threat to Western society and our way of life. So it's been an active war. I don't think that 3 weeks. I think that and we've said this before in previous shows. It's been 3 weeks. It's been 3 weeks and too many dead. But I don't believe that you're going to be able to unravel 47 years of a regime that's been entrenched and has purchased one way or the other the loyalty of those who will go out and kill their fellow countrymen so that they can protect themselves and their families in just 3 weeks. I trust President Trump and his strategy here. I trust that he needs to move his pieces along the chessboard. I agree with Eric that I believe that some of these nations that say what they say publicly and what they allow privately are two different things, but certainly it is inevitable that if there's regime change that needs to occur in two places. First and foremost, it's Iran. And secondly, I believe it's I know it is, it's the country of my heritage of Cuba, but let's stay with Iran first. That is I believe it's going to occur. And I trust in the actions and the deliberate actions, both diplomatically, economically in the region, and of course, militarily, that the Trump administration has been taking to position itself so that these protesters and that their lives are not in vain, that have been lost or arrested, and that we will finally see an end to Khomeini's rule and the mullahs' rule here in Iran in short order. But we have to trust, we have to be diligent. I know that with every day that passes, there's another life lost, and we will honor those sacrifices. But as we know, a regime change in Iran not only changes the dynamics in terms of foreign policy and national security for the United States in the Middle East, it has an impact in a bunch of different hemispheres, including our own, since we know that Iran has been dealing with countries like Venezuela.
Well, that's very well said, Jesse, because we've been talking on this show amongst the three of us and with our guests about this axis of evil. And these are not isolated problems for the United States or for Western civilization. Iran has played in our hemisphere, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in other places that are sympathetic to these extremists. And it's time to root it out. If you knock out the underpinnings of Iran, all these other places can fall into place, and we can have freedom again in the Western hemisphere, and we can have freedom again, or at least a more civilized diplomatic approach to what's going on in the Middle East. So the Iran situation is deeply connected to the problems we have in the Western Hemisphere with Venezuela and with Cuba and other states, Nicaragua, for example, Colombia. But what can we do? The first thing you do, and to use a term of art that everybody uses, you have to get rid of the head of the snake. The head of the snake is Iran. But there are other big snakes out there playing in this axis of evil, as we've discussed, gentlemen, and that's China and Russia. By taking out Iran, you weaken China and Russia, who are much more than our adversaries. They are existential threats to the survival of the United States of America, our allies, and Western civilization. This is...
Well, if you take...
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, if you take out Iran, you also push Russia and China out of the Middle East. And I'll make a prediction. It is Iran, assuming we take them out, will recognize the state of Israel before Saudi Arabia.
That would be interesting. We'll have to follow up on that prediction, Erica. I hope we're right. We're going to take a break now. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, attorney, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments with the final segment of this week's Let the Record Show. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
When you want your spring break to feel like... and your kids' pool day to feel like... and your hotel bed to feel like... ooh, and room service to feel like... because at Hilton, hospitality feels like...
Your cabana's ready. Would you like fresh towels?
It matters where you stay. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data, Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use, helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
You don't show up for easy. You show up to chase the rep that scares you, the tempo that shakes your legs. That's why you're in the Lululemon Wonder Train Tight. Built with our fastest drying fabric, it stays comfortable even when you go hard. And it's now available in no line with zero front seam, so you can tackle your toughest challenges seamlessly. Shop Wonder Train and all new Wonder Train No Line in-store and online at lululemon.com.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party. With us is our co-host, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. And joining us now in this final segment of this week's show is our very good friend, Congressman John Faso. John is a graduate of Georgetown Law School. He was the minority leader of the New York State Assembly. He was a member of Congress. He is a great lawyer, both election law and redistricting, and a good friend to Jesse, to Eric, and to myself, and most importantly, a good friend to constitutional government and responsible governance. So, John, welcome to Let the Record Show.
Judge, it's great to be with you and your listeners and your co-hosts, and a shout out to my old family and friends living in Massapequa and Seaford, where I grew up.
Well, we all have connections to the island. Everybody on this call has connections to the island. So they used to say that 1 in 4 people have connection to Brooklyn in the whole country. I don't know if that's true anymore, given the lawless immigration policy of the Bidens, but certainly a lot of us have connections to Long Island. That's true.
Yes.
So,
and we wanted to talk about that other island, Staten Island.
That's exactly right. Island. So let me set this up for our listeners, John. There was a whole controversy. There was a constitutional amendment. There was a constitutional provision that had to do with an independent districting commission. The Democrats played games with it. There was litigation. Ultimately, lines were cut. The lines have been established. Nicole Maliotakis has a district which is part of Staten Island, part of Brooklyn. She herself is half Cuban, half Greek, so she herself is Latino. And all of a sudden, this character, this hired gun from the Democratic Party, character named Mark Elias, who makes a living bringing these trumped-up nonsense lawsuits to cause disruption and waste of resources, time, and effort, and attempt to fix the lines. And they bring a case. They bring in the state Supreme Court, and there's a judge named Perlman who used to work for the Democratic leadership in Albany, as well as for the Democratic Governor Hochul. He comes in, he writes in my humble opinion, as a former judge, and not a bad lawyer, I think, in my time, writes a ridiculous decision And now we're on our way to an appellate review, which may well wind up in the Supreme Court of the United States. So with that lengthy introduction, John, I turn it over to you.
Yes, Judge, you're absolutely right. This was an 11th hour effort to blow up the Staten Island-Brooklyn congressional district, which has, by the way, existed since 1982. And it is a logical, compact, contiguous district which has existed over 40 years. And they made an allegation that the composition of the district going from Staten Island to Brooklyn was unfairly diminishing the ability of Black and Hispanic voters to elect a candidate of their choice. And they proposed that the district should be altered to go from Staten Island to Lower Manhattan, and cutting the population of South Brooklyn out of that seat. And this was a fairly gross effort. Under the guise of a Voting Rights Act, they were attempting to create a politically gerrymandered district, which is exactly contrary to the constitutional amendment that the people of New York voted on in 2014. The other thing that is really strange here is that, and Judge, you mentioned that in 2022, we successfully won a case in New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals, to overturn the gerrymander of congressional districts that the Democrats in Albany had attempted. Then those district lines drawn by a court expert who was appointed by the judge created many competitive districts in New York State. Then the same Mark Elias law firm brought another suit in 2024, or actually 2023, to try to have the legislature redraw the district lines. They partially succeeded in that regard, but the important thing to note is that Governor Hochul and the legislature adopted the 11th congressional district, which, as you mentioned, Nicole Malliotakis represents, all of Staten Island and part of southern Brooklyn. They adopted new lines, but didn't change the contours of New York 11 one bit. And now Mark Elias brought this new case, a phony case, in October last year. And frankly, the decision by Justice Perlman was really misguided and not grounded in the Constitution, the law, or even the facts. And so our side is appealing that decision by Justice Perlman. And the one part of the judge's order said that the new lines should be created by February 6th, which is a week from today. There's no conceivable way that possibly can occur in that time frame. So we're optimistic that our appeal will be successful, whether it's in the state courts or ultimately in the United States Supreme Court. But this is another sad example of basically politicians trying to rig the system for their benefit and not the benefit of the people. My own view is that redistricting should only occur once every decade, not this mid-year redistricting. Some Republicans have done it in other states. Some Democrats have done it in other states. I think it's all wrong. I do think that having a once-a-decade redistricting process serves the public interest to a great degree, and we shouldn't change that.
Yeah, in fact, by the way, before I turn you over to Eric and then to Jesse, I'd point out that Elias is also trying to do the same stunt in the Commonwealth of Virginia as we speak.
That's correct.
That's what he does. That's what he does. He tries to, and one of the purposes of this is to divert time, attention, resources from running for re-election to fighting in the litigation. And if they get lucky, they win a case and they get new lines. But even at worst, they devote amounts of money, tens of millions of dollars to litigations, and then that money is not available for a fair campaign.
Right. Exactly right.
Eric, your turn.
Yeah, hey, John. Thanks for joining us. One of the questions I have, maybe it's just the lawyer in me. Our listeners should know that not just anybody can bring a lawsuit. You have to have what they call standing. You have to have a legitimate right that's been compromised in some way for you to be able to bring a claim. How do we determine in these cases who has standing to bring lawsuits over a gerrymandering case?
It's a good question, Eric. the standing here was achieved by having 4 voters, 2 in Staten Island and 2 in Lower Manhattan, who were the named plaintiffs. But typically in these kind of cases, they bring party adherents as the front to create the standing. And these front plaintiffs have obviously no economic stake in trying to finance the litigation. That is financed by deep-pocketed donors who are supporting what Mark Elias attempts to do.
So what is who funds these? Where does the money come from to fund these litigations? On Elias's part. For Elias. Who's paying Elias to bring the case?
You would never find out because the money flows through organizations, C3, 4 organizations that under the tax code, which are not required to be disclosed.
Okay. Do we have any sense of where they're coming from?
It's coming from very liberal donors who are trying to achieve their political ends in this way. And to be fair, Republicans in financing redistricting litigation will also rely upon, a donor base that is interested in advancing Republican goals. So I'm not here to say that all the Republicans are pure and all the Democrats are not. But in this case, it's the Democrats with unclean hands. And the irony is that Governor Hochul and the legislative leaders in Albany, they are nominal defendants in this case because the litigation is brought against the state and the governor and the legislative leaders saying, you created a district that's racially discriminatory. Now, can you imagine the governor and the legislature overwhelmingly, bipartisan, passed these lines in 2024 and didn't change New York 11, the Nicole Malliotakis district in Brooklyn and Staten Island, didn't change those lines by one person. And yet now, a few months later, Mark Elias brings a Democratic sponsored lawsuit alleging that Governor Hochul and the legislative leaders passed a districting plan for Staten Island and southern Brooklyn that is racially discriminatory against Black and Hispanic voters. It's just utter nonsense.
And they're not even defending. They're not even defending the lines that they were part of.
Exactly.
Yeah, but what even makes it more laughable is that the leader of the Assembly, leader of the Senate are both African Americans.
That's true. Yeah, the whole thing. The whole thing is a very expensive joke, and unfortunately, if they were to succeed, and I don't think they will, but if they were to succeed, it would mean that approximately 300,000 voters who currently live in Nicole Malliotakis' Brooklyn area district, they would be displaced and moved into another congressional district, and voters in southern Manhattan would be displaced out of the one they're in now and moved into a different district. So that is very confusing to the average voter when those district lines change. It's difficult enough when you do it once every 10 years because you have to adjust districts based upon population changes among the states and within a state. But to do it multiple times within 10 years is very unfair to those voters.
Jesse.
John, thank you for being here, and thank you for, number one, for your service to the state of New York, both in your capacity as an assembly leader, and a member of Congress, but certainly someone who has championed and defended the mantle of fair elections and democracy here in the state of New York. One of probably the tough places to defend that with a partisan courts, as we have experienced. As I was growing up, I was taught in social studies class that we redistricted every 10 years. And it seems in this cycle that redistricting has been with us for almost right now into the 6th year of a 10-year period of time between census. Do you see any type of a future where these frivolous cases are finally exhausted to the point where we go back to you conduct a census, you have a redistricting, you do whatever litigation that happens in the first 18 months of that, and then that people have their representatives or know who are representing them or what districts are being represented in for, the balance of that 10-year period? Do you think we'll ever, after this cycle, get back to that time and period, or is this the new norm?
I'm afraid that it is the new norm, and I think that we really need cooler heads to prevail on this, both Democrat and Republican. And I think that we're at the point where we need to, at least from congressional districts, have Congress enact a law which says that redistricting can only occur once every 10 years. And I think that would be a salutary approach to this. And look, the New York Constitution says that you can't do a mid-decade redistricting unless it's ordered by a court. The Democrats in Albany, they want to override the Independent Redistricting Commission and remove it. This was a reform that Ed Koch advocated for a number of years, and we had Democrats and Republicans saying, take the politics out of these lines as much as you can. You can't always take the political considerations out. Let's be fair about that. But doing it once every 10 years and having the bipartisan commission that was set up in 2014, largely through the advocacy of former Mayor Ed Koch, I think that's a more desirable thing than having this process continually go on and on within that decade. I mean, if they succeed in this Staten Island litigation that they have brought, that would mean that we would have changed the districts 3 times already in the first decade. In the first 6 years of this, after the last census in 2020, we would have had to change districts 3 times, and that is crazy.
Well, the problem, if you step back, people could say, well, why do we care so much about one district? The fact of the matter is, what you're really talking about is you're talking about a significant district where you only have one Republican member of Congress for the entire city of New York. And it's very, very important that both parties are represented in the halls of Congress and are able to go to the White House and to deal with the issues that face both the city and the state of New York. It's a very big deal to have bipartisan work done to protect and defend the city of New York's interest and all of New York State's interest. So that's one issue. But this is really about this is really about raw political power, and this is really about who's going to control the United States House of Representatives come the new Congress.
That's right.
And what I submit to Jesse and to Eric and to you, Congressman Faso, is, in the immortal words of Obama, elections have consequences. It's very, very important, and I say this as the House Democrat, it's very important that you have a two-party system in the city of New York, in the state of New York, and, of course, in the country. And it's very, very important if President Trump is going to be successful in protecting our national interests, our economy, protect our borders, make sure that we're not overrun by Islamists or cartel members or gangs, that we're not overrun by corruption, that we have a viable country that can go forward. We need to maintain the House leadership under Speaker Johnson, because otherwise, if the House is taken over by the Democrats have already announced, John, that what they're going to do is they're going to try to impeach Trump again. And we all know the likelihood is that the Republicans will hold the Senate. It's more problematic with respect to the House. But now you're going to have the congressional committees having these nonsense hearings on every issue. They're going to use all their subpoena powers to embarrass and cause problems. They're going to try to impeach. You're going to divert the president's attention. He's going to have to fight to get his agenda sustained. These are real problems. As a former legislative leader, both in Albany and as a member of Congress, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, very unfortunate, that so much of the Democratic Party agenda today is just geared at one thing, which is to get Donald Trump. And look, I don't agree with President Trump on every issue, but I think that it's important that we keep this kind of partisan warfare to a minimum, because we have major issues that the country is facing, both domestically and internationally. And by diverting attention on on a lot of things that are really extraneous to the lives of average Americans, I think that's against our national interest. So I really think that, we have problems with how are we going to finance the Social Security system, which in 2034 will start running out of funds. How are we going to deal with the tremendous national debt and deficits that we're running, basically imposing the costs of our spending today on our children and grandchildren? And how are we going to confront the rise of China and the aggressiveness of China and Russia and others around the world who really want to undermine American democracy and the system that we've all grown to know and understand as the bulwark of freedom in the world. I mean, that's what they are out to do, to undermine the democratic process. You talk about threats to democracy. Well, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and the Iranian mullahs, they're the biggest threats to democracy that we have. It's not Donald Trump.
Absolutely well said. So, Congressman John Faso, on behalf of Chairman Garcia, Eric Levine, and myself, it's been a great delight having you on this show today. We're going to have you back as this case unfolds. Hopefully, this will be resolved earlier rather than later. But if necessary, we should all be supporting your efforts and the efforts of the people fighting against this illegal, unconstitutional gerrymander against the Congressional District Number 11, which is now held by a great Congresswoman, Nicole Maliotakis. John, thank you for joining us. And I want to sign off on behalf of Eric, Jesse, you, Congressman, myself. This has been Let the Record Show. And as always, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to Let the Record Show. You can hear Let the Record Show Sunday mornings at 6. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and busts. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.